All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So obviously we're talking about the finals countdown, how to prepare for your finals. One of the things that you want to keep in mind is that when you start preparing for your finals, you're going to start this way in advance. So let's say right now it's November 16th, 17th range. You should start actually preparing for your finals probably this week or next week. Start going through your notes, because normally I would say the 2 to 3 weeks range is when you want to start, because you think about all the tests that you've taken so far, and you need to start going back and trying to organize all that material. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. So some of the things that we'll look at is general tips on studying for finals, specific ways to study for final exams, 10 things to remember on the day of your exam, and of course 6 tips to beat your finals exam stress. So first one is don't procrastinate. So that's one of the biggest problems that most students face, and I know, have you encountered any of this at all in your time?
What?
Procrastinating.
Yeah.
Okay, so procrastinating is one of those deals that I would say the majority of students encounter this. I will say when I was a student, that was probably my only advantage that I had. I was generally on top of things, so I was able to kind of stay ahead of, a lot of the assignments there. A lot of people, when they procrastinate, what are some of the things that they may do to procrastinate? What's one of your things that you do when you consider yourself procrastinating?
Like watch TV shows.
Okay, watching TV is definitely one of those. For some students, maybe it's playing video games or whatever, maybe getting on Facebook or whatever, social media type stuff. And so, but if you think about that, ask yourself, how much time do you probably spend per week on either TV, getting on the internet, whatever it may be? Then ask yourself, how much time are you studying that week? And so, and I can tell you there are some students who will put in 25 and 30 hours of TV and playing on games and so forth. And it doesn't seem like that. Most of them don't think they're spending that much time on there, but when you add it up for the entire week, it ends up generally being that area. So I would say, one thing you need to do is always plan ahead. If you're planning ahead and you know that you have everything mapped out, what you want to do, chances are you're going to avoid procrastinating if you have good game planning. So, some of the tips that we can look at for studying for the final is obviously find a quiet place to study. Now, that's different depending on the circumstances. Like for me, I always liked a little bit of noise in the background, so I didn't really like going necessarily to the library all the time where it's nice and quiet. I prefer to study at home. I would have a little bit of TV on in the background. I could study, take a break, and kind of go back and forth. For others, they have to find that place, that quiet place, whether it's the library. I know some students who tell me they like to go and study out in their car. They just go out there, maybe they get here a little bit, a little early before school starts, and they just like to spend maybe 20, 30 minutes just sitting in their vehicle and just, maybe listen to a little bit of music and just reading, their book and stuff, or going through their notes. So that's part of it. Oh, come on in. And so I would say having a place where you can concentrate and take your time. You want to be comfortable in that circumstance wherever you're at. You want to avoid, cell phones, Facebook, anything that's going to distract you. So for example, I know some of you, study, and would you say you get distracted at times when your phone goes off or someone's texting you? And do you find yourself texting them back when you're kind of studying? Probably. And so actually maybe turning that phone off or putting it in your bag somewhere where you don't see it necessarily. That way you give yourself X amount of time without being distracted. So for example, let's say if you're at the library, you decide, okay, I'm going to study here. You're probably not going to want to talk on the phone anyway in the library, so you might as well just put your phone in your bag where you don't see it. You don't have to worry about any type of distraction. And it's not like you have to study for a long period of time either. So for some, we say, well, I can't turn off my phone because something important, someone could call me or whatever. But you could, I would think, be able to put it away for at least 15 or 20 minutes without any big concerns there. So if you only study for 15 or 20 minutes at the library, just turn your phone off during that short period of time. It should be fine. And so some other things, study with the partner. That is something that I definitely did when I was in school. Normally I'd have a friend that was in the same class as me. We're studying for the same type of test. And so a lot of times we would go over our notes together. And what I liked about it was there's a lot of things that I covered in my notes. Like I liked the single out professors' phrases, certain words that they use quite a bit. I always tried to make sure that I focused in on that, because when I would take my test, especially if it was like an essay, I would make sure I used some of their phrases that they use in class. Now, I had another friend who was really good at just writing every single thing down. I mean, it didn't matter what it was, he wrote every word down, it seemed. And so I'd be able to go and look at his notes and find my gaps, and we would, team up together. And I was better at typing, so I would type up both of our notes. I would take his stuff, my stuff, and combine it, and then I would give him a copy, and we'd constantly go back and go through those notes over and over. And so that is something that you can think about doing. Ask yourself: is there anyone in your class that that might be someone to study with? That could potentially be someone that you could study with. And so I would definitely think about that. Also, make sure that you actually choose the right person, because let's say you decide to have the study group with this person and you're teaming up, and then you guys are talking nonstop about something besides studying. And so it can become a distraction. So you go in there to study for an hour with them, and you find out we didn't really talk about hardly anything that would related to our upcoming tests. So you do want to actually pick the right partner, or you're just going to be wasting your time there. So or make sure that if you are going to do that, set some time just for that. So if you're going to study for an hour, maybe you get there 15 minutes early so you can kind of catch up, talk a little bit, then go into the actual studying. And so you have to plan your time just right for that. So another tip, keep everything in perspective. A lot of people tend to stress out. They stress out quite a bit related to exams. They're worried that if I fail this class, it's going to be the end of college as you know it. That they can make themselves believe that they're going to do bad, and then they do bad. So you've got to look at it, as it's one test. It's one test out of many, most likely, overall. And with your final, if you've been doing what you need to up to that point, hopefully one test is not going to make or break your entire grade of the course if you have been doing what you need to the entire semester. Now, obviously, if you haven't been doing exactly what you're supposed to, you might be in some trouble there towards the end, and that final, is going to decide whether or not you pass or fail the class. So you do need to actually start doing this well in advance, trying to prepare. Also, take a break when you get frustrated. How many times have you been studying for an exam or trying to prepare for something, and you just keep getting frustrated? You're tired, you're exhausted, you don't even want to look at it anymore, and what do you do in that case? So what do you do? When you are tired and frustrated over an exam, what do you do?
Get some food or something.
Okay, so take a break, get away from it, whether it's food. One thing I like to do, and it was something that, I don't know why I did, but I went to Walmart a lot. I don't know what it was, I went to Walmart. A lot of times what I would do is that when I was studying, I was tired, I would just take a break. Walmart was only, like a 5-minute drive normally, so I would just get in the car, drive there, I'd walk around Walmart a little bit. They have magazines, and so I would just kind of look at some of the magazines while I was there. Just a way to kind of, take a break, instead of looking at that textbook all day long, and go look at something else. And normally, now this is back in the day when, the canned pops were a little bit cheaper, so I'd get like a quarter pop, there, and then I'd walk around, look at some magazines, take my break, and then I could come back home and start over and be more refreshed. And sometimes what I would do is if I was tired, and frustrated from looking at, one particular area, then when I come back, I would start a different subject. And so, like for example, if I was taking a math class, and there was many times when I got frustrated, I would do my homework, I'd take a break, go do something. When I come back, I'd start on another subject, work on that for a while, then I could come back to the math later on. So it's all about managing your time, but also managing your emotions, because that's going to play a big part in how you do. I mean, it's more psychological than sometimes the other, because you can psych yourself out, where you don't want to do the work anymore. And so you have to find that balance there. And so whatever you do, remember that it's not the end of the world. If you're getting stressed out, just get away from it for a little while. Take a break. Some specific ways to study for final exams: certainly review tests. quizzes, homework assignments. A lot of times you will have tests that are comprehensive. So the best way to approach that is to kind of keep all the assignments that you have done for that semester, because you can always go back and look at some of those questions. Chances are your professor is probably going to draw off some of those questions. Now they may rephrase it slightly, potentially on a test. They may use word for word. They just draw from those quizzes, in former tests. And so I always, I was always, kind of curious why some students, when they got their test back. Now sometimes professors don't give you your test back, but some do. But I would see sometimes that, students, after they get their test back, throw it in the trash, on their way out. They go there, look through there, they throw it in the trash. They don't want to see it anymore. Maybe they didn't do well, on the test. Maybe that's part of it. But I always looked at it as an opportunity to keep that, look at the structure of that test, because I knew that, one, the professor would probably have something similar structure-wise, whether it's X amount of multiple choice, X amount of short answer, and so forth. But also I knew that they could potentially use those questions or something very similar to that. But it also just allowed me to kind of get into their head a little bit and kind of see, how they would, all the material that we covered in that class, what were they taking out and putting on the test. You can kind of gauge and see, their way of thinking. So I would definitely suggest, if you get the opportunity before you start your finals, is go through, look at those tests, those quizzes, any papers or any assignments that you have done, and kind of see, could my professor use any of that type of information? Does any of you think that maybe you have a class where you could do that? Is there any class this semester that you've taken that you think, we may actually have a comprehensive final, and I could see them drawing from some of those old tests and quizzes? I see it's shaking a head, yes.
Yeah, for my psychology class.
Okay. A lot of terms in that class, probably.
Every chapter builds off the previous chapter, so I'm pretty sure the final is going to
probably be comprehensive over everything. And so keeping all those assignments, I think is going to be good. Now, obviously, if your professor gives you a study guide, that's going to make life a lot easier, but not every professor does that. And so that's one thing that when I was as an undergrad, especially when I was majoring in political science, for whatever reason, our political science department, just did not believe in study guides. And so we just didn't get study guides in our class. They just said, know all your notes, and good luck, basically. So if they do offer study guide, that's going to save a lot more time. But we also know is that how many times have you encountered this? They give you a study guide, and only like half is even on there on the study guide, on the actual test. And so you do have to cover everything. So it's good to be slightly paranoid, so that way you are more willing to look at every possible thing that could be on that test. And so all I know is that when I was in school, I tried to take every advantage I could. And so I kept my tests, I kept my quizzes, I kept whatever assignments that they gave me. If they did give me a study guide, I made sure I knew that, but I also made sure that I was looking back at my own test, because we both know some professors try to surprise you just a little bit on the test. So be prepared for everything. Something else that you need to do, I would say create study cards. So basically flashcards. Flashcards are great, especially a class like you were saying, like sociology, because a lot of terms that you have in that course. And so now, when it comes to flashcards, you see that elementary school on up, they use this. But I think it's even better in college, because one of the persons that helped me when I was starting out, one of the things that he told me is that you don't know it until you write it down. So the flashcards allows you to write it down, so chances are you're going to remember just a little bit more compared to just simply reading out of the textbook. So if you're taking notes in class, that's one thing right there where you're writing. If you take your notes and then turn those into flashcards, that's the second time that you're writing it down. And then one thing that I used to do in addition to the flashcards is I would try to create my own test. Because I would try to get into their head a little bit and say, okay, I've covered this amount of material. What are some possible multiple choice questions that they could come up with? And so I would try to take those flashcards and turn it into a question. And so that allowed me also to write it down again. So that's that third time that I'm writing it down. And then when I got done with all that, then I could go back and forth on different ways. I could look at my notes and then when I got tired of looking at my notes, because you do get burned out if you look at it over and over, then I could go to the flashcards. I could look at my flashcards over and over for a while. And then when I got tired of that, I could look at my kind of fake test that I created, and kind of go over that. And so by the time that you actually show up for the test, you're probably not going to be nearly as stressed out because you have been writing this over and over and over. And what if, for example, you're in a class where you actually have to write some of these terms out? The spelling, intimidate you sometimes. Am I going to be able to actually spell this correctly? And so writing it down multiple times allows you to also to work on your spelling, for that term. And so, do any of you do flashcards at all? So does that work for you?
I love it. That's
Okay.
my best method of studying. Is
Yep.
to write flashcards, and then I have my friend quiz me from
Yep.
the sides.
And why do you think that's probably your best? What makes it help you? Why does it help you?
Because I don't know, I can learn. I can always create pals, and I can learn what I need to learn, and what I don't learn or don't understand, I put that in a separate pal, and I can go over that more. And it's always it's easy to carry around, so I can always pull out my flashcard and study at any time. I think it's just more convenient.
Okay, so that there's certainly convenience. So you can be almost anywhere, take out those flashcards and do that. And so yeah, there's a lot of convenience, even though I will say some students complain initially because of the time that it takes to create them. But once you actually create them, it's going to save you time in the long run, because you can constantly go back over those, and you can pretty much do it anywhere. So that you can be at work, and if you get a break, you can take out your flashcards and go through them. And so, but a lot of students, they just don't want to invest that initial time to actually write them out. But I will say, by writing them down, chances are you're going to remember them a little bit more compared to only taking notes once in class and then occasionally going back and looking at your notes. The more you look at it, the more you write it down, the more it's probably going to sink in and stick there. So, some other things that you can do. This is just an example of how you can do the flashcards if you decide to do that. So, for example, up there, those are more the definition style. So, I took math, for example, because you can even do it in a math class. The greatest common factor, that would be on one side, the front side, then the definition would be on the back side. Same thing like quadratic formula, you can actually show the formula on the back side. So, you can do it for any class, I would say. Sociology, history courses, psychology, those are obviously, some of the most common ones out there because there's so many terms, that you will cover definitions-wise. But you can even do it for math classes. And I will say there are some, math professors that will allow you to have a note card, for your test. And you can just write down as many formulas and examples as you possibly can, on that note card. So I didn't have that luxury, but I've heard, some, students that are, their professors are letting them do that. So even, for your final, there are some, professors that are willing to let you bring in like one note card or one page of notes, for your test. And so if that happens, you want to maximize and get the most that you can on that note card. And so, but your typical note card or flashcard, you have the term on one side, definition, on the other. So, some specific ways to study for your final, continued. Form a study group. So I think that is a great resource, is actually trying to get more, several students in your class to actually team up and work together. You can debate, what's going on, some of those topics that, that you're covering. Everyone interprets things slightly different. So it's good to kind of get their feedback. Because I can tell you, when I had some of my study groups, I would believe one thing on something, then I'd have a couple other people that saw it completely different. Even though I might not necessarily agree with their interpretation of that, I always made sure that I tried to cover it if I had, like an essay on a test. Because I'd rather cover it just to play it safe. So I would maybe write, some may contend, and then I'd put their point of view, how they see it, just so I covered everything. As a political science major, almost all of our tests were essay. You show up, you have a blue book, and they give you somewhere between 3 or 4 essay questions, and you write as much as you possibly can in an hour. And so almost everything was essay for me there. So this study group and debating the different topics, I would say helped. Have any of you tried the study group yet this semester at all? And why do you think you probably haven't yet? Is there maybe a reason why? Is it hard to find the right group in some cases? Or maybe it's time constraint. You know, you just don't have the time, or just didn't think you really need it at this stage, maybe. So let's think about that.
I just don't know how to make friends.
Okay.
I
Don't
know
know.
people in my class that go up to them and ask to form a study group.
Yeah, and I will say that is actually one of the main reasons why you don't see a lot of study groups. You know, it's trying to initiate, you know, that first step. Saying, hey, would you like to maybe, you know, study together, or and maybe there's a couple other people. You try to add to that group over time. A lot of times, what I did was, you know, I had generally, you know, one study partner because we took a lot of the same classes, and then over time, you know, people learned that we were studying together for, you know, for a lot of our classes. And especially once you get towards your major, you will probably be able to meet more people that are taking the exact same class as you, especially more than one class, you know. So there, later on, you'll have some students that you'll have for 4 or 5 classes. And so you will really get to know them, and you may be able to get to know a few others, and then you can start forming that study group. I would say if the main problem is that maybe you just haven't initiated it, haven't asked, maybe that's something that you should try. You know, I mean, because the chances are you probably have talked to at least one person in your class. Have you talked, and I'm assuming that is, have we talked to at least one person in your class?
Sometimes.
Okay, so chances are you have talked to someone, and so maybe next time, you know, before the final starts, you may, you know, ask, like, hey, you know, you want to, you know, maybe study sometime at the library or whatever, you know, kind of go over the material. That can at least start it, and you never know. I mean, it may develop into, you know, long-term friendship there, you know, over time. I remember when I started, you know, at Southeastern Oklahoma State University, started in the summer, and there was another guy, you know, in the class, you know, and he seemed to be pretty diligent. He studied a lot, you could tell. And so I remember just asking him, was like, you know, do you want to study sometime, you know, after class or something? And that's how it started. And then, you know, we ended up taking a lot of classes together. We probably took about 6 or 7 classes together, you know, while we were there. And we studied every time together, you know, for our test. And then we had others joining the group over time, you know, after they started hearing about that. And we started doing better on our exams as a result, because we could constantly kind of go back and forth, you know, debating some of those issues. That's the same person that I would, you know, look at his notes, and I typed up both of our notes. And so, I mean, so you have to at least initiate it. If you don't initiate it, then obviously it's probably not going to have a study group. So it never hurts to ask. And if they say no, what's the big deal? You know, it just means that maybe that's not the person you want to be studying with, you know, if they don't want to do it. And so, so there's really no, you know, bad response in my opinion. So you do want to make sure that you find the right partner, you know, so that way you can compare notes, you know, you can help each other identify correct answers from past quizzes and tests. So chances are maybe they can bring in, you know, their test as well. Maybe they're doing particularly well in one subject area. So for example, I was horrible at multiple choice. We only had one professor that was in our political science department that even had multiple choice. Everyone else did essays. Now he did a little bit of multiple choice and then essay. And so my friend always did really well on his multiple choice, but I did really bad. So a lot of times I would try to ask him questions, about how he approached that. And so I could look at his strategies on how he did that. I was better at the essays, and so I could help him, with the essays. And so we could basically help each other's weaknesses, in that regard. So keep that in mind. So 10 things to remember on the day of your exam. First thing, arrive early. It also helps to know your location. So you should know it by now, hopefully. And so, but one thing to keep in mind for finals week is that you will be going off a different schedule. It's not always at the same time as your regular class. So you do need to be looking, online and checking, the schedule. And a lot of times your professor will have that in their syllabus, when, your actual exam is. So you definitely want to make sure that you know the exact time and you want to arrive there early, because what happens if you don't arrive there early, you're going off the ode time and you end up being there like either 30 or maybe an hour late. And that has happened in some cases. When I used to teach government, that actually happened, to a couple students because they wasn't paying attention. Even though it was in their syllabus, they just didn't even think about it. It was their first semester ever in college. They overlooked it, and they were an hour late. Now the good thing is that most of your finals, you generally have a couple hours. So they still had time, to do it, But you can imagine how much pressure they were under, and the anxiety, stress, being an hour late for your final. So you definitely want to know when it is, get there early, and also when you get there early, what are you getting to do? You're kind of getting to calm down, you settle down, you get in your seat, kind of get ready, because it's more the mental part there too, just trying to get mentally prepared for your actual test. And what do you see a lot of times students do? They end up showing their, a couple minutes before, they're going through their notes really fast, just trying to cram everything they possibly can in that 2-minute stretch before the final is. Normally what I would do is a couple minutes before the final, I would not look at my notes, because at that stage, if I didn't know it, I didn't know it. I would just try to more or less, focus, just kind of relax, kind of get prepared a little bit. So, for example, number 2, be actually awake for the test. So, that means get a good night's sleep beforehand. Don't stay up all night cramming, the night before, trying to cover everything you possibly can. So, actually, chew gum, have, a caffeinated drink, something to kind of get you, kind of awake and ready to go. Now, does any of you like to, to have bottled water when you go into a test or anything? So you have all that stuff prepared, be ready for it. So, eat a small breakfast. Now, I wasn't much of eating in the morning time. Normally got my stomach upset, so I try to make it really light, but I would want to eat something, because how many times have you gone in there and your stomach starts growling as you're taking the test? Or you hear someone else's stomach growling as you're taking the test. So you do want to eat at least a little something. Also, bring extra writing utensils. So have a couple pencils or pen, that tends to help. I can't tell you how many times that I'd be given a final for when I taught government, and I'd have a student who has one pencil, that's it, he's writing, then breaks it, and then he just stares. Like, what am I supposed to do? And then eventually he gets up, or she, and goes and asks you, hey, you got an extra pencil or pen I can borrow, or ask someone else. And so it's better to have 2 or 3 pencils or a pen, whatever your professor asks. I had one professor who said that we had to have black ink. It had to be a pen, it had to be black ink, and if it was blue ink, he would not accept it. So you might want to know what they accept and what they don't accept. And so, but I would always have maybe 3 or 4 pencils, a couple pens, depending on the circumstances. And I'd have it ready to go. I have them sharpened ahead of time, so that way I don't have to get up in the middle of the test, sharpen my pencil, distract everyone. Has that happened to you as you're taking a test, where you have someone get up, have to go in there, and they're making that noise, trying to sharpen their pencil? And what do you think of that when it happens?
Really annoying.
Okay, it can be a little annoying at times. Now, are we guilty of doing this ourselves at any time? Have we done any of this before? Okay, so that's a good thing, So make sure you have plenty of pencils or pens. Bring all the the essential test material. Like if it's a math class and they allow you to have a calculator, you might want to have a calculator. And because what happens if everyone else has a calculator and you don't? Who has the advantage?
Everyone else.
Yeah, everyone else. So you need to have that. It's the same thing like if you have a test that's like open note. You forget to bring your notes, or maybe it's an open book test. There are certainly professors that do that at times. So you show up, you're ready to go, and then he tells, okay, this will be an open book. You don't have your textbook. So who has the advantage then? Everyone else who has their book. So you need to make sure that you have this. Even if you have a test and you're not sure that it's going to be open book, have your book anyway. At least have it in your bag. So if somehow they surprise you and say, you know what, you can take out your book and we'll make it an open book test. And I've seen professors do that, at the last minute decide, to help out that way. So have all that material, or you'll be the one asking, hey, can I borrow, your book over there, when you're done. So it becomes a mess. Also, actually go to the bathroom beforehand. That tends to help, so you don't have to get up in the middle of class, and ask, hey, can I go to the bathroom? So, I would definitely, if you need to go beforehand. Also, wear comfortable clothes. And what I mean by that, also know what the appropriate clothes that you need. So, for example, if you know there's a classroom that you always go into in a super coat all the time, you probably don't want to wear a short sleeve shirt going in there. You want to dress in layers, and if you need to take a few of those layers off, you can while you're in there. Because if it's freezing and you go in there in your super coat, do you think it's going to be a little bit harder to take the test when you're freezing? Or if you're burning up or hot, dress in layers, and then you can take, maybe a sweater off if you need to, if it's gets a little too hot in there. So definitely make sure you prepare for that. Bring, any, necessities. So like if it's water or tissue, cough drops. Like with this weather, your nose may be running a little bit, so it's good to have a little bit of tissue. Or you're gonna have to get up and go ask to go to the bathroom to do all that stuff. So, it takes away time. Also, look over your notes. It's good to actually review your information, before you actually take the test. But also make sure that there's a time limit. So one thing I did was once there was about 5 minutes to go, I didn't look at my notes after that point. At that point, I'm just trying to relax, kind of stay calm, focus on my game plan, what I want to do. And so, but before then, you can certainly go and look at your notes to help you kind of refresh or remember it a little bit. Also, it's just a test. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a test. It's not the end of the world. I mean, I can't tell you how much stress tests put people through. And it took me a while myself to kind of get to that point. A lot of times, the reason why I saw a lot of people stress is because they didn't prepare for the test. I mean, that was the majority of the stress. They didn't prepare. They're cramming last minute stuff, so that's going to put a lot of strain on you. If you prepare, you do what you're supposed to, you're probably not going to stress out nearly as much, on an actual test. So one thing that we'll look at is the stress part. So 6 tips to beat final exam stress. Avoid stressful people. That would be number 1. Do you have a friend or someone that is always stressed, and as a result, generally gets you pretty stressed out at the same time, with all the worries that are going on? So you have to try to avoid that, especially during finals week. I know maybe it's a little selfish, but hey, you have to do whatever you got to do in order to do well. So if you have to actually tell them, what, I can't be around that, then you're going to have to do that, because don't let them get in the way of you doing well. So you have to kind of avoid those super tense friends, at least during finals week. Certainly, eat healthy and exercise. I mean, they do have a gym here, but you have to pay for it, so you might as well take advantage of that. One thing that I love to do is like to run. So sometimes I would just go, get a good run in, then I could come back and work, on my studies. So it's another way of just trying to, that stress reliever a little bit. Does any of you go to the gym at all here?
I've been to it, but I can't say I'm actively going every single day.
Now, when you have gone there, does it help you at all? I mean, do you feel better after you get a good workout in? And so the idea is to try to find the balance in there. So, that way, maybe during finals week, maybe, after you've taken, a couple finals or whatever, and you're done for the day, maybe you go to the gym, get a really good workout in, and then you can come back and start studying, for your next final. And so you can kind of go back and forth, with that. Now, obviously, if you have to drive a lot, it may make it more difficult. But if you live close by, is it really going to take that much time out of your day just to go and kind of get a workout in? Do you work out at all?
Yeah.
Something to think about. Something to think about. And keep in mind, you pay for it, so you might as well get your money's worth. It's $150 a semester.
Is it open during break?
Well, they are open 7 days a week. Now, even during the break, they're typically open, but their hours have changed slightly. So now, for example, they're generally always out, like on a major holiday, Christmas Eve or Christmas. But even during the break, they are open. They just change their hours. Most of the time, they're open from 6 o'clock, in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. And so there's generally always time to go there. Now, I think Saturday they close at like 8 o'clock. So, but still, I mean, they're open every single day. So, and even like when we have snow days at times, a lot of times they're still open. Because most of the time it's college students who work there anyway, and so they just walk over because they live on campus. And so the majority of the time when it's we're out for a snow day, they're open. So also think about that. So, but yes, eating healthy, exercising, that definitely I think helps. Also, just say no. Sometimes you have to actually tell people no. They want to take your time. They want you to go do something. So maybe maybe your boyfriend's, oh, let's go do this. Let's and you're like, I can't do it. I've got too much going on, you know, with finals. I just can't go see that movie or whatever. Or maybe they want you to go over to some friend's house, which you know if you go over there, you could be there for 3-4 hours. You know, so eventually you just have to tell them no. Now, if they're really your friend, you know, they will, I think, in the end, understand when you tell them no. And if they don't understand, then you know what? That's their problem, not yours. So it's okay to be just a little bit selfish, you know, when it comes to, you know, trying to prepare for your finals. Force yourself to take breaks. Now, it says here, you know, for every hour, you know, that you work, take 10 or 15 minutes. Normally, when I studied, I like to study for the 20-25 minutes range, and then I would take my 10-minute break. So everyone's different. Some people can study 2 or 3 hours straight and then take a break. I'm not one of those people. I would get burned out pretty quick. And so one of the things that I would do is I'd study that 20-25 minute range, and then I'd take a break, go do something. Maybe it was go to Walmart or whatever it was, or just, you know, something to get away from it. And then I would come back and study another 20-25 minutes for, you know, and then take another break. So I would end up doing this kind of throughout the entire day. So I may, you know, actually look at a particular subject maybe 5 or 6 times that day, but it was always in short amounts of time, and it helped me because of the repetition, that constantly going back over and over and over. But also you can do it where you study one subject for 20 minutes, take a break, then come back and do a completely different subject, you know, for another 20 or so minutes. And so you can constantly go back and forth with that. And so in the end, I mean, it's your time. I mean, what works for you? So, for example, I may ask you, what is your best time? You know, when it comes to studying, when do you find yourself getting to the point where you can't really look at it anymore? So what is your best time? So, for example, do you like to study for an hour, then have to have a break, or is it even less time than that? So what's your best time?
I can usually go for an hour, hour and a half, and then take a break.